Today I just want to give you a little bit of a glimpse at a work in progress, which is our New South Wales Future Transport Technology Roadmap, which, as David mentioned, started with our summit back in April and is very much being built, some thinking about what we will do with all of these emerging and disruptive technologies that are starting to manifest themselves today. And then beyond showing you what the thinking is that's going into the roadmap itself, I just want to talk quickly about a couple of here and now things. So the Future Transport Technology Roadmap. As most of you would know, we started with a summit back in April this year, and really the idea about that was coming off some pretty firm direction that was given to us by our Minister. And Minister Constance was pretty clear in some conversations we had early on with him that he sees technology as being playing an increasing role in what transport does and how it will deliver services to customers in the future. And he's pretty keen to make sure that we are riding the wave, on the wave. I think he's a keen surfer, but riding the waves of technology, not paddling behind trying to catch up or being dumped by new waves that come along. So the challenge that was set to us was to have a really close look at all of these new technologies that are emerging and figure out how we can use them to put New South Wales at the forefront of using these new technologies to deliver better transport and customer outcomes. So we started with the Future Transport Summit, over 500 people who came along. We asked industry leaders, academics, people who are out there in associated industries actually forging the way with new technologies to come and sit with us and talk with us about what they were doing and how it could be applied to transport. In fact, we got a number of sponsors and supporters to actually help us bring international speakers along to us, and amongst the 500 of us we had quite a stimulating and energetic conversation over 2 days about what the possibilities are with all of these emerging technologies and where you might go. So that was back in mid-April, and I want to show you where we've gone since then. But we haven't just stopped talking with the industry and with others that are in the field. We also wanted to kind of leverage off any thoughts and ideas that our own people have, because sometimes they have great ideas about the application of technology that will solve a transport problem and deliver a better customer outcome. So we actually kind of put up, in effect, a hack the company kind of challenge in what we called our Entrepreneurs Hothouse. We did it with an ideation platform online. We actually got over 500 staff, put forward 700 ideas. We filtered them down, some really great innovative ideas of stuff we could do here and now in the next little while to deliver a better transport outcome. So that happened just at the end of June. Telstra were very generous to us in letting us use their ideation centre, their incubation hub. And coming out of that, we've actually now set up, with a little bit of seed funding, a rapid prototyping process and our own little incubator that's going to take the best of those ideas and turn them into concrete things that we actually use for our customers' benefit over the course of the next 12 months. More news, you'll hear things, I hope, over the course of, particularly from the start of next year, coming out of this process, and you'll think, oh, that's a cool idea, where did that come from? It'll have come from probably either the Entrepreneurs Hothouse or indeed the summit itself. We also said to ourselves, as part of this, we want to talk to the youth. We want to talk to those who are going to be using the systems tomorrow and in the decades to come about what their vision and what their view of life is going to be about transport in 2030 plus. I can't tell you the number of meetings we have in rooms where you're with a bunch of 40 plus or 50 plus people who are kind of prognosticating about what the young people of today are like and what they will be like in 10, 20 or 30 years. We've decided we're going to have a direct conversation with them, which is the purpose of the Youth Summit. So out of all that, we're kind of assembling a whole bundle of information and thoughts about where we might take technology coming in the coming years and decades. In essence, what we've learned already through these conversations, and this is a fairly condensed map, but we identified 12 emerging technologies that are around today that in some combination will have an influence on how we deliver transport over the course of the coming couple of decades. Now, what we've also done is we've done a jurisdictional scan. We've had some great help and support from LEK, who are, again, doing some work for us as a program partner in looking around the world. And what we found is pretty much like Susan's presented to you about Australia, is there are lots of jurisdictions with some really interesting initiatives going on in a number of these different fields. But we haven't yet found a jurisdiction which has really crisply articulated what is its strategy and what is its roadmap overall for the use of these technologies. And that's really what developing the New South Wales Future Transport Technology Roadmap is about. So, I think you can read the technologies on the screen, so I'm not going to kind of take you through on a cook's tour of them, but they are the things that typically you will see and you will hear talked about, whether it's artificial intelligence or next-gen ICT or connected and autonomous vehicles, which of course is causing a lot of excitement in the industry at the moment. So, out of all of those technologies, the question that we've started to turn our minds to is, let's think about those 12 technologies. Let's think forward about 15 years, 15 to 20 years, because it takes kind of that period of time for a new technology to mature and play out fully in a market. And let's think about what that could mean and what the scenario might look like. So what we've done in this session, in this part of our development of a roadmap, is think about 3 different scenarios. The first one is very much about the rise of the connected autonomous vehicle. You might say it's the vehicle that becomes the ubiquitous connected autonomous vehicle, as we might conceive it today at our convenience, with very little change to our habits and our practices. But there's another scenario, and that's the scenario which I think is the scenario where you think about all of the kind of sharing economy that's happening at the moment and the areas that David and Uber are working in and others like them, where you shift very much with those connected and autonomous vehicles, but to much more a collaborative consumption model. And then the third model, which again is a scenario that could arise out of some associated new technologies like advanced manufacturing, 3D printing, very much the rise of e-service delivery, which delivers more service in the home, in education and health, is there could be a scenario there that arises where in fact the new way of using technology reduces the overall demand for mobility. Just as an aside, I think, and I might be wrong, don't quote me on the numbers, but you know, Uber's Uber view of the world is that each of us takes 150, 160 trips a month in total out of home, and you know, they're aiming at a particular share of movement, kind of like a food and beverage company might aim at share of stomach. So you have to think about that total movement, and is that movement going to stay the same, increase or decrease? And there are technologies around that might reduce the demand for mobility overall. So we've been working with some guidance from a panel, an internal panel that's in fact chaired by David Thodey. The Minister invited David Thodey, Andrew Stevens, Kate Burley, who's the MD of Intel, and Mike Pratt, our Customer Services Commissioner, to help guide our thinking. So inside of the business, we've got some SMEs, myself and some colleagues, plus the Secretary are kind of guiding the formulation of this, but we're doing it with good, robust challenge from people who are in the field and who understand and see the bigger picture of the applications of technology. And I think the conclusion we reached in our last round table with the leaders panel was that in fact these scenarios are actually going to play out not in a mutually exclusive fashion, but we'll see the technologies as they emerge and develop create realities that are like each of these, and each of these have some broader implications, not just for the use of technology, but as you know, it's also about our societal settings, it's also about economic settings as well, as to what the cost is and what we perceive the benefits to be. So we're kind of looking at these 3 different scenarios, and out of that we're coming up with an integrated view, and this is what this slide is intended to convey, of irrespective of how those scenarios play out, there is most likely to be, and at this stage we're looking at 5 key common themes that are going to apply in each of these scenarios. And so what we need to do is create a technology roadmap that addresses each of these. Now, I said to you at the start of this is a work in progress, and so you'll see that colourful little device at the bottom. We're still debating furiously internally and doing our analysis back to what came out at the summit to understand what are the building blocks that we then use. So I'll take you into that in a minute. But the building blocks will fall out of these 5 areas. And as I've unfortunately left my glasses on the table, I'm going to go from memory, and therefore, no, go from memory. Thank you. I'll go from memory and just kind of work my way through this list, but excuse me if I go out of order. So the first thing is it's very clear that with mass data sets, open data and IP and advanced data analytics, that all of those things are going to converge in some way, shape or form to assist us in dynamically managing demand and helping us to deliver mobility to our customers. So that's item one, that we have to kind of disaggregate and think, well, where are the building blocks that we can put together a technology roadmap based on this being something that will drive and underpin the outcomes in any one of those scenarios. Likewise, no matter which scenario you look at, you have to conclude that there will be a mass transit backbone that will continue to function. We want that mass transit backbone to be highly automated and make efficient use of capacity and use technology to enable that. And that will be connected to something where we think there's a lot more play space and things could develop differently, which is in that first mile, last mile. Interesting that David was pointing out with his map earlier on, one illustration of how that might occur. So mass transit backbone with very flexible, demand-driven last mile, first mile solutions. The third thing, clearly connected and autonomous vehicles are going to be a feature on the horizon. We need to get used to that. And we need to find a way to think through how the play out of that technology will emerge. Now, there's lots of different views of life as to how it might play out, at what rate it will come, what sectors it will come in. We're not getting into that detail at the moment. We're just asking ourselves, what are the technology building blocks that will underpin the successful play out of that technology so that New South Wales can be a leader in harnessing the benefits of that to deliver better customer outcomes. Another area is dynamic demand management and also the concept of bringing out the collaborative consumption of capacity. So again, we're looking at that as a particular area, and here I will use my glasses because I did say 5 at the beginning. That's right, flexible service models, flexible kind of technology platforms and service models that enable the aggregation of demand and help us to deliver a better customer experience. So there'll be a bunch of technologies around there, a bunch of things around there that are going to play out using those 12 technologies. We're just in the space of figuring out now where those building blocks are. So what will happen, so we've kind of set the view now as to where we want to be in terms of harnessing these new technologies for New South Wales to be at the forefront of the use, delivering benefits to transport customers. We've identified 5 areas where, irrespective of the scenario, there will be a role for transport and for government to play. And now we kind of are breaking it down into the areas where there will be a technology roadmap. The other thing, if I can get this to work. Can someone press a button, please? There we go. So the other thing that we're just contemplating briefly is we have to give some thought to New South Wales and, for that matter, Australia's what we call positional advantage. And I've just thrown 6 of those up on the screen just to give you a sense of saying, well, you know, we've done our analysis of the technology. We know we want to use it to deliver better customer outcomes. But let's think about where we are here in New South Wales today. What could we leverage off? And these are 6 features amongst the set of considerations that we're looking at. First of all, and in no particular order, Australians and Australia in general is highly connected and they are rapid and early adopters of new technology. So we're the guys that are going to be playing around with it first. And that augurs well for us in terms of being an experimental test bed where we can attract people who've got new technologies to play if we get the settings right. In terms of our own city, so the concept of the Silicon Harbour, it's starting to emerge where you've got UTS and others who are kind of creating interesting spaces where there are academics. Data 61 is set up just down at Australian Technology Park. What are the things that we could do, because data is very clearly going to be one of those valuable assets and building blocks, what are the things that we could do to make this a transport data technology hotspot? Sydney Metro, another one that again is an area for us to leverage. We're bringing advanced technology in terms of mass transit to Australia, and we're actually delivering it in 2 stages in a very exciting project. If someone wants details because they haven't heard about it, come and talk to me afterwards. But suffice it to say that is our end-to-end that is our mass transit backbone. But how could we build out off of that flexible, demand-driven mobility solutions for first mile, last mile, and how would we experiment with that. On the other side of the ledger, we've got Western Sydney Airport. I think there was some press this morning about Western Sydney generally being a boom town. It's very clear that that's a rapidly growing area, and we have opportunities, particularly now working hand in glove with the Greater Sydney Commission, to create an integrated transport and land use plan for the future development of that part of Sydney that can make use of the new technologies without having to deal with the dead weight and inertia of legacy systems. So there's an area of opportunity for us in thinking through how we might take first steps or early steps in our technology roadmap. And then finally, and importantly for us as a city, what's always been said about Australia in general as public transport is we're at a disadvantage because we don't have the urban densities that those cities in Europe and Asia have. But there is an opportunity to actually turn that into an advantage in terms of development of making innovative uses of technology to improve mobility in that sort of environment. So let's not feel hampered by it. Let's actually use it to our advantage. So those are our positional advantages. What we're really in the space now of is, again, as I said, taking all those building blocks on the bottom left-hand side of the page and thinking through what is our role as government and what is the stance that we should adopt. And we've just got ourselves a generic model. There are certain roles that government can play, whether it's as a regulator or as a service provider or as a market maker or just as an enabler. And then within each of those roles that government plays, what is the stance or the posture that we should take to make a difference? Now, again, the conversation is around, well, there are a bunch of these things, these technologies here where we're just going to be pulled along by the development of the technology itself. It's just making sure we get the right conditions not to inhibit its development and uptake in this jurisdiction or to take advantage of it. But at the other end of the scale, there are other areas where we are going to need to push, where we're going to need to take measures, which some of us call placing our bets, but take specific measures as government in order to stimulate or encourage development and adoption of that technology in this jurisdiction to pursue the outcomes that we're looking for. So again, I said work in progress. You are seeing what we call inside the team brains at work. This is kind of the inner workings. The neurons are starting to fire using this particular roadmap at the moment. And to end on the roadmap, so the technology roadmap is where we're going. Later in this year we will have a draft technology roadmap. The key thing about this particular program is we're not a bunch of, I don't like using the B words, but bureaucrats sitting in a back room kind of working out a plan by traditional policy formulation methods. We are doing this with lots of industry engagement, collaboration and input. So later this year we're going to put out a draft technology roadmap. The New South Wales Transport Technology Roadmap, which kind of captures all this stuff and steps out what we think we should be doing next, and we'll be seeking further industry engagement and input in order to finalise and refine that roadmap. Off the back of that, you will see a whole bunch of then initiatives following through. Now, this is not just kind of something that's looking forward to 20 years or even 15 years or a decade later. You know, there are also elements in this which are our very next steps in what we're doing. And I just want to take you into the kind of the here and now space for a moment. I see Tom from Cubic over there. So this is Cubic's grand final day is coming up on Monday. Again, for those that haven't heard the announcements, paper tickets, it's the end of the paper ticket era come Sunday. We are on an Opal-only world on Monday. That takes us from a position 4 years ago where we were over a decade behind London to being just a couple of years behind them, because the very next thing we do is we step into the land of trialling EMV, you being able to use your contactless credit card to operate the system. The Minister announced early next year we are working on a trial for next year. So ticketing system moving forward at a rapid rate of knots. Another thing that's just crept up on us, the apps. So public transport apps started just about 4 years ago when we started to connect real operational systems that have real-time information into the cloud and work with app developers. What's happened in the last 4 years has been an absolute explosion in the use of apps to help customers navigate the system using real-time information. 124 million data packets sent out in April to real-time apps. These are coming off our network. So in terms of a rough ratio, for every one trip that's taken on public transport, we're currently sending out 2 packets of real-time data to someone's app somewhere. So there's been a huge uptake, and you'll see the curve is just going north at a rapid rate of knots. There's over 4 million individual downloads of these apps that we've worked. None of those we own. All of them we've co-created with entrepreneurs around the place. And in the latest iteration, we've kind of brought in Move It and a whole bunch of other people. One of the things, and this was again announced by the Minister at the summit, open data. We announced open data. We put an open data platform, real-time feeds there. We're starting to enrich it. Later this year, you'll see Opal data going up onto the open data platform, but already we've got over 1,000 registered users, data scientists, academics and institutions, developers, hackers are all on there, developing apps and other, yes, I know, whoops, Freudian slip, developing apps and doing other interesting things. You know, as I say to my colleagues, you know, something really good is coming out of this. I've just got no idea what it is. Yeah, but there is very much a lot of interest in use of the Open Data Portal, and that can only increase. So as much as we're mapping out a future, and a very bright future, which in programmatic sense sets a coherent strategy about how we use these new technologies to get better transport outcomes, there's some stuff that's happening here and now, which I hope you'll have got the sense of from me, is very exciting for this state. Thank you.